A talk is not just a one-sided affair. There's the speaker and there's the audience. The speaker says certain things and the audience reacts to those certain things. So tonight, as you listen and watch, I want you to do something that perhaps you've never done before in your life. I want you to notice very carefully what happens to you as a result of hearing what you're going to be hearing. Now listen carefully at the very start. There is a way out for each one of you of your difficulties. Now you know you have difficulties and problems and strains and pressures. I am telling you at the very start tonight that these pains and heartaches can be dissolved. And I also will remind you what I said a moment ago, that during a talk like this, you have a certain responsibility. And if you will take that responsibility, take it fully and persistently and very alertly, take that responsibility, you will then be joined with the truths that you're hearing tonight. It is quite necessary then, in a talk where there's a speaker and there's an audience, for the audience to take, the individuals in the audience to take a very alert responsibility to what they're hearing. And if you do this, it should become very clear to you in a talk such as you're hearing now, it should become very clear to you that something inside of you is very much disinterested in hearing what you're hearing. Unless you know this, unless you see this, the importance of the truths will elude you. And the reason for this is because you, up till now in your life, do not see how deeply, how dreadfully, how painfully you are taken over by unawareness, no facts about yourself and about life. You don't see how deeply you are immersed in your fancies and fantasies. So when you see yourself reacting, even as I'm talking to you right now, when you see yourself reacting, you can say to yourself, 30 seconds ago, that man in the chair up there said that I should look and see how disinterested I am in what is being said. Having become aware of your disinterest, and there's more to it than that, having become aware of your resistance to what you're hearing, the talk itself will make a sense to you that it never made before. Why? Because you, for the first time, are being a watcher of the inner battle. Before it was nothing, you could see it all. It just went on. Just like a battle in Afghanistan or somewhere with two sides battling. You know nothing about it because it's so distant. This interest you have in seeing your responses to what I am saying, your interest in that will bring the battle very close to home. And you'll understand why you get so disturbed when you're the last man at the grocery market checking your groceries out. Or why you're so uncertain of who you are and desperately look around for someone who will tell you who you are. Which can never be done, by the way. Not a human personality. A human personality can't tell you who you are. So if you can see even the resistance of a wandering mind, of boredom, of pushing things away, you are on to something that is tremendous. And what is so tremendous is that you are on to what has been punishing you, not the social system. Not your spouse, not really. Not your age, you're growing older, you wish you were younger, whatever. Not that at all. But there's one thing that causes you problems, which is the way your mind operates, and since it operates now in delusion, we can begin to get on the track of that by seeing its resistance to what is being said. Now, you may think that what I'm saying applies only to people who come here for the first time, new students. If you haven't changed yourself in the last few months or years, then it applies very much to you. And you can come to this class and you can sit here and you can argue, not with me and not with truth. You can argue for the sake of the vibration of arguing for the entire 30 minutes of the talk. And not have the slightest notion that that is what you are doing. Now, if you want to make these talks 4 times a week and more valuable to you, never forget to be vitally interested in seeing that you don't understand what I'm saying, which you don't. And the reason you don't understand it is precisely because you would rather misunderstand than understand. Anytime you want to get what you are hearing here, you can have it. Now look where that leaves you. That leaves you with these unconscious walls that we've talked about so often. That leaves you with the preference for crying and saying, I don't get it. My mind is lost. My emotions rage. And that's what you prefer, to make that statement, the emotional statement that you can't get it. Now, I'm going to say it again, and you're not going to get out of it this time. You didn't get out of it the first time. If you want to grasp, to see, to understand the truths that we're talking about here, the truths that can transform you, if you want them, you can have them. Now, when you complain to me, as many of you do, in one way or another, that you're not getting anywhere, and you ask me for special projects, you ask me what to do, I know what you're doing. I know that you're simply playing another one of those little games that you love to play, in which you want to emotionalize, in which you want to evade, in which you want to argue. You know what I see when I see that? I see a pathetic little child. I don't care how old you are, 30, 50, 60. I see a pathetic little child who won't learn. And I'll tell you why you won't learn. I'll tell you a story that will illustrate it. You're away from home, aren't you? Your spiritual home. You want to get back home? You say you do. And I'll repeat what I said a minute ago. If you really wanted to get back home, you can go there. You can be on your way. If you're on the wrong highway, there's a reason for it, and you are the reason for it. Don't kid me. I know your stubbornness. I know your trickiness. That's why there's no sentimentality and no softness here. You can't get away with it. Well, anyway, here's this man who was a long ways from home. And he got in his car and he got out on a highway, and he saw these merchants with their shops on both sides of the highway. So he stopped in at one of them. He asked the man, how do I get back home? And he told him where he lived. And the merchant said, fine, no problem there. Take this highway that you're now on. Just follow it all the way and you'll get back home safely. Well, the man had been fooled a few times in his life, so he didn't take the merchant's word for it. So he went next door and asked the other merchant the same question. I want to get back home. How do I do it? What road will take me there? The merchant gave him the information. Same one. Same plan. Get on that highway, follow all the way, and you'll go back home. So the man got in his car and started driving for long, long ways. And it was a long, long trip. And every once in a while he'd stop and he'd check at the cafe where he stopped, at the motel where he stayed overnight, at the grocery store, at the gas station. He stopped all along the way, and every time he did that, he asked the person in charge there, how do I get back home? And he always got the same answer. You're in the right place, sir. Just stay on that highway and you'll get back home. So he drove the car and down. But he knew the hills of his home when he saw them, and he didn't see them. And he saw that the highway sometimes go very narrow and sometimes wide, but he knew one thing for sure, that he wasn't getting any closer to home, and he could feel it. He could sense it. And at this point, I'll tell you something that we know about that situation that our traveler doesn't know. He's being lied to by the merchants. Everyone you know lies to you. Everyone you know is a merchant. There are plenty of merchants right here in this room. They tell you that you're on the right road because they want to have your patronage and your money. They want you as a customer. What do you think they're going to say when the only thing they know is self-interest? They want to sell you their stuff, and they're all in collusion over it to tell you. Each one says, be sure to tell that traveler and every other traveler that he's on the right road, and you'll have to patronize us. So lying to you has been a very profitable business for the merchants along the highway. So it went on for a long, long time. But I'll tell you what this man had. He had some religious training. And deep in his mind and in his system, he had certain words that he learned in his religious training, such as trust, such as faith, such as confidence, such as believe. So the poor, foolish man kept saying to himself, I believe, I trust. These people who are giving me the directions are telling me the truth. I trust. Let me pause in the talk to interject a side thought. There is no more stupid, dangerous, shallow, foolish human being than one who says, I believe, I trust, I have faith, I have confidence. No one is more stupid or dangerous to you than to themselves. So I drove down the highway, getting no closer to home, and he knew it. One time he saw a stranger sitting under a tree alongside the road, so he decided to ask the stranger if he was on the right road. And the stranger said, no, you're on the wrong road. And the man was so used, after all this time on the highway, of hearing someone telling me he was on the right road, that he actually was startled when the man said, no, you're on the wrong road. You'll never get home traveling this highway. So the motorist was so intrigued by the difference in the response that he had a brief conversation with a stranger. And he said, well, if this isn't the right road, what is the right road? How do I find it? And the stranger said, very easy. You have to leave the highway, and you have to leave the merchants, and you have to stop believing, and you have to stop trusting, and you have to stop thinking that these people are trustworthy just so you can use the word trust as a religious phrase. What you have to do is leave the highway altogether and have no path at all. Cut right across country where it's bumpy and rocky and there are no merchants and no one out there. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of scary things out there, things that you've never seen before, things that are not familiar to you. You have to leave the highway and cut across, and eventually you'll get home. That is the only way home. This road has been set up for thousands of years by con men, by deceivers, by murderers and robbers and thieves who have put their businesses alongside the road to satisfy themselves, and whether you get home or not is of no concern to them. They want what they want. So the man thought over this advice for a long time as he traveled along. And he was in great conflict now, wasn't he? Because he had been told that he can't trust anymore, but his whole psychic system was geared to saying the word trust and believe in people. You believe in people. You seated here tonight in a way that you don't know. You believe in people and you trust them. Don't tell me you have spiritual suspicion. Don't trust anyone. Don't trust anything. Don't have faith. Don't believe. When you believe, you're believing in yourself. How horrible. Do you see this honestly now? Nod your head inwardly. Do you see what you're doing when you believe in yourself? You're believing in your own confusion and worshiping that. And if you believe in yourself in the wrong way, which you do, you're also going to believe in everyone else in the wrong way. I'll tell you, you're all prime targets for the merchants alongside the road. They've been selling you their shoddy goods for a long time, haven't they? And you've been buying at those exorbitant prices. And when the stranger, which of course is the truth, when the truth comes along and tries to tell you something different, you don't want it, which is why I told you at the very start of things tonight. What happens to you as you hear these talks? What goes on inside of you? If something was going on right inside of you, I would see different expressions on your faces. You wouldn't talk to me the way you talk to me. When I'm seated there in that chair and I talk to you across the room, you would not come toward me just an excuse to get to talk with me. You'd say yes or no and turn around and walk the other way. You're so weak. You have no life of your own. I see you. You're compelled just because I spoke to you to come up and talk to me. And you don't even know you do it. That's how weakly pathetic you are. Well, now look. You want the strength, or you want to patronize the merchants who lie to you, and you're lying to yourself. You are the merchants. The lies are inside of you. Your own lies are selling you all this falsehood. You understand that you have no choice but to be scared, to tremble when you're far from home. You understand that? What else is there when you're separate from who you really are but to be scared and to take the slightest opportunity to lean on someone else? Not necessarily me, but anyone else. Or to lean on some little foolish little thoughts you have that everything is going to be all right in the future. There was a scientist, an inventor, who was asked how he became so creative, how he broke through to invent all these marvelous machines and scientific equipment that helped the world on in its daily work. And you know what he said? He said something that you should say. In explaining how he became so authentically creative in the scientific world, he said, I never saw anything wrong with being wrong. You refuse to be wrong. You're so tied up in your pseudo-security of that family that you call security, that relationship that you call right, that employment, that package of thoughts that you've got, that excitement you're looking forward to. You're so tied up in that you don't even see that it's wrong. You don't even see how you defend your wrongness, how you fight to retain your own agitated misery. So I'll ask you now. You tell me what's wrong with simply being wrong. Shall I make it stronger? What's wrong with dying at any given instant? What's wrong with dying to that fierce antagonism and aggressiveness that swells up inside of you? What's wrong with dying to that instantly when it comes up? So that you can't think of what to do. So that you don't know what to do. So you have no plan, you have no response, you have no reaction. You have nothing to say, you have nothing to feel. You have no defense, you have no offense. What's wrong with that? You think there's something wrong with that? Because you are still suffering from that condition we have called a false feeling of life. You're still suffering from that condition that says, that lies, one of the merchants, that lies and says, there's something you have something valuable. Hang on to it. Don't let anyone take anything away from you. Don't let anyone steal anything away. Hang on to it for your dear life. At that very moment, where you're tense like this, where you're angry, what would you call that feeling? What would you call that emotion? What would you call that expression on your face when you're fierce over something? Would you call that life? See? Now look, I know what's happening here right now. I can sense it. And here's what's happening. You've heard these things before. The words are familiar to you. The ideas are familiar to you. And I am telling you, you don't know what I'm talking about. I know the trick that you are playing on yourself. We just caught another one of those lying merchants. You are saying to yourself, I do understand that. That is true. That is true, for example, that it's wrong to call fiery feelings life when they're death. Yeah, I heard him say that before. You won't die to it. Sure, you can agree to it with your intellect. Of course you can. You can nod your head. I see you nodding your heads. But I know you haven't done it. I know that one of the tricks you endlessly play on yourself is to convince yourself, have trust in, believe that you understand a certain truth. If you understood the truth, you would not suffer from the lie. And so since you still suffer from the lie, you don't know the truth. You know the words, you know the surface meaning of it. You still suffer because you don't know that above the two opposite responses that we talk about, you don't know that there's a third one. Let's see. You have to make a psychological decision. You have decision 1 and you have decision 2. And unfortunately for your nervous system, that is all you have. Is decision 1 or decision 2, and you waver back and forth, wondering which one is going to be best for you, because you don't even know that there's no you there that has to consider it. How about the third position of being excited one minute and depressed the next, elated over something, and then the next day you're low and blue and despondent again. This is the two responses you have. I am telling you that there is a third reaction. There's a third reaction that you can, listen to this, a third reaction that you can carry with you just as much as if you had it in your pocket. You could carry it with you so that you never go into these opposite responses anymore, because you see the challenge coming a mile off. And something that is not you, your divided mind, handles it and puts it out of the way without any ripping apart of yourself. How can some of you in this room talk to me on the telephone the way you talk to me? How can some of you talk to me in this when I'm at the chair there the way you talk to me? How can you do that and say that you're understanding these things? I sit there and I listen to you talk, and I myself say, what have they been doing out in that audience all these years? Nothing has changed. That poor human being, there's no way to tell him that he's not understanding what he could understand. What are you willing then to give up in order to get all the way home? What are you trusting? What are you believing in? See how your thoughts create all your beliefs and all your so-called convictions. And you come up here and you're friendly with me, and you go out of here the same lost human being that you were before. We forget so easily that the adverse forces against spiritual development, we forget that they are invisible. We're so used to relying on our physical senses, sight, hearing, and so on. We're so used to relying on those that when we see a war, when we see a hostile, angry man or woman, we make the easy but false assumption that the enemy is that physical object out there, whether it's an army tank or an angry face or whatever. We rarely remember that the real enemy, the source of hostility toward truth and goodness and decency, we rarely remember that it is an invisible energy which is merely operating through the machine gun or the fist or the sword. So remind yourself right now, as we proceed here this morning, that the real enemy is unseen. If you think that the enemy is that actual fist of that man out there, if you think the real enemy is the gun, then what are you going to do? You're going to clench your own fist, aren't you? You're going to say the way to fight that enemy, the fist, is to clench my own fist. The way to fight the man with the gun is to get my own gun. Now, that is called two things. It's called violence, and it's also called stupidity, where we think that the enemy is a physical thing, and all we have is a physical reaction of our own on the same low level as our perception. We go out and wreck the world under the disguise of improving it through striking back or standing up for our rights or conquering the enemy country or whatever. So we know already then that we have to be very perceptive and very wise when we identify the enemy. Now, what's the enemy? Well, the enemy is anything that doesn't want you to wake up. The enemy is whisperings that tell you that you already are on the right track. The enemy is anything that is against your evolution and development into a whole and healthy and sane human being. There it is. Anything that's angry, anything that's smart alecky, anything that is against your real purpose here on earth, which is to wake up. Now, it is an excellent idea, and I want you, from now on, when you see any human being, there he is, he's got arms, legs, and he can talk, and he can walk around. You're seeing a physical representation of energy that has come down and formed itself into flesh. But when you see that person, don't you dare continue with your mistake of thinking that he's an independent entity who walks and thinks and talks and acts on his own. He doesn't. She doesn't. What he is a physical form that is activated by energy that comes down into him, and that energy then tells him, orders him, demands that he talk in a certain way, think in a certain way, feel in a certain way, all that is destructive to the individual and whomever he's in contact with. You think then of people, of anyone, and you include yourself in it too, as simply a machine that actually has wheels and gears and motors just like any other machine, that is activated by an invisible force. And of course, when it is activated, it then does express itself physically in the fists and in the wars and in the quarrels in the home. You know, if we wanted to find examples of what we're talking about, you know, I don't have to mention World War II. You don't have to mention riots in some other country, Europe, or somewhere. All you have to think about is the quarrels in your own home. Remember when you were a child? All those quarrels? Something was wrong, wasn't it? So, Just think of all the quarrels and hostilities you have ever been involved with, and you'll see that outwardly the man, the woman, the mother, the father was a scared human being. But did you understand at that time that they were merely activated? No, you didn't. And you may have a hard time seeing that even now. But we're going to explore it a little bit this morning, and you'll understand that your first thought should be, when you see that human machine out there, what invisible force is activating him or her to say what she says, to do what he does, to have that particular attitude that shows itself outwardly in fear or in crying or whatever. If you can go this far, if you can see that other person as someone who is being acted upon by invisible forces, if you really see it thoroughly, you will be a different kind of person in relationship to that man, woman, machine out there. Having understood it means that you've also understood that you are in the same condition, that you yourself are a mere machine that anybody can set off. All they have to do is walk by you some morning, and usually you say good morning, but the other person is distracted and doesn't say hello, and you wonder why they now hate you. You say, what did I do, right? Anything can set us off. Having understood your own sensitivity, touchiness is a better word, having understood that, you are free of it. Full understanding of it frees you from yourself, therefore of the other person's mechanical reactions to you and the whole world. And you get in possession by your very insight, awareness, comprehension. You be able to take right in your own hands a switch that you can turn in many different directions in order to authentically control and command every other man machine on earth. Now, you're not controlling them because you have a neurotic need for power, of course. And you're not controlling them in order to get some kind of an ego advantage or victory or thrill some kind over them. The control I am talking about is the control that understands you don't need a thing from that person. You don't need a thing. You already have everything that you need through your long, hard work on yourself. You now have the self-command. But here's the point I'm getting at. Have you noticed the millions of varieties of challenges that come to you from other people? Their states are different each time, so you have to quickly adjust to that state, that is, understand it. And then the next minute they'll flip-flop over right back to another state, and then they'll flip back to the original again. Now, there has to be, most certainly, flexibility, a great, beautiful flexibility, which doesn't have any effort at all, by the way, and you don't have to strain at it. You don't have to think, well, how should I behave toward him now that he's changed? You will know. There's no conflict in you at all. What I'm saying, that if you have gone through the process of understanding the invisible energies that control that person out there, that is the insight in you that allows you to handle people in 1,000 different ways appropriate to the circumstance. Sometimes a person who is hostile toward you, maybe you'll just simply walk away. See, you have to judge everything in the now. Don't you go into time thinking or you'll make a mistake. If I said to you, for example, never talk to a hostile person, and you say, okay, he said never talk to a hostile person, and you walk away, that might be the very thing that would arouse violence in them. See, look, being wise is not being cowardly or weak. Wisdom is strength in handling wild animals from the zoo out there. So one time in talking to another person, you understand the invisible forces that are motivating them. Sometimes one time you might walk away. Another time you might just sit calmly and just let them pour out their violence and their pains or whatever it might be, and you just listen to them. In other words, awareness, insight has 10,000 flexibilities, all of which you can choose, or rather it comes to you at the moment of the challenge. So that's the first thing we want to remember, that all enemies, the enemy being unconscious forces, are invisible. So that's what you have to start to study. You have to, a person can tell you verbally what his motive is, and if you're stupid and gullible, you believe it. How much we emphasize in these classes. Don't take anyone's word for anything. Even themselves don't know the division in them and how they are tricking themselves and you in order to get what they want. Don't take anyone's word for anything. And why should you take their word for it, for what they want from you or don't want or whatever, when you can understand them and know from yourself? We've all been taking other people's words for what they want or don't want from us, and we've all got into trouble, haven't we? This is the higher way, that you can understand, listen to this please, you can understand invisible motives and trickeries just as clearly as you can now look and see a person being angry or in false cheerfulness or something like that. Just as easy, because your inner eyesight is just as sharp as your eyes, your visual eyesight. All right, we've seen what the enemy is, that it's invisible, primarily, essentially. Now I want to go into something that will require a good deal of alertness on your part in order to catch it when it happens. And it happens all the time. It has happened to all of you here many times just this morning, to say nothing of your past life, which is this. I'll illustrate it a little bit. You know what a counterattack is? In warfare, actual warfare, here are two armies opposing each other out on the battlefield, and one of the generals gets his plans together, and he tells his officers and men, we're going to attack the enemy. And so they get all their guns in position, and the men with their bayonets on, and they go over the trenches and cross the barbed wire into the enemy position and attack the enemy. Now, it takes a lot of force to attack. And when you attack an enemy, it drains your forces. I'll stick to the military illustration for now. So the enemy puts all his force, infantry, air power, and so on, into the attack on the enemy, and either defeats him or doesn't, or drives him back, or pretty much a stalemate, or whatever. Now, here's the point. At the moment the attack has reached its peak, all the ammunition has been expended, and all the gasoline has run out of the tanks, and the soldiers are tired after many hours attacking and afraid, and fear makes you tired, doesn't it? At a certain point, the attack reaches its peak, and then it falls away. It starts to get weaker and weaker, correct? Right. The ammunition is gone. Now, parallel this with your spiritual battle. At the moment, the energy has been exhausted on the attacking force. The other generals, who's been watching all along, he knew the attack was coming. The artillery goes first. He knew the attack was coming, so he says, okay, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to defend my ground as best I can, but I'm going to have some reserve troops back there, fresh, their rifles ready to go. And the minute I see that the attack has been fully attacked and the enemy is exhausted, I tell the colonel back there, counter attack, which he does, and with varying results on that. Now listen, trouble with you have only so much energy, and you waste it, by the way, in wrong things. So when you're given a truth here, you're given a certain fact. If you're really working on it, it becomes a certain attack against the enemy. And then the enemy, the spiritual enemy, the invisible force, immediately attacks you back. And you don't understand this process, and you're exhausted from your putting your energy in trying to understand something, and so you foolishly relax, and the counterattack comes, and it succeeds. Haven't you noticed sometimes how you go out of this class and you go home and get depressed? Haven't you noticed that? See, you didn't know. You were asleep. You weren't a very good spiritual commander-in-chief. Instead of staying awake, instead of putting on your spiritual binoculars and watching every movement of the enemy out there, the enemy in there, you relaxed, went to sleep, and even went to a certain vanity of saying, hey, I made pretty good progress tonight. I saw a certain thing and understood a little more. And even that could be deception, because maybe you just enjoyed the good company here more than anything else. You enjoyed the relaxation here. We're very relaxed here, aren't we? You can be far more relaxed here maybe than you are at home in some ways. But anyway, you went to sleep, you left your gun unloaded, and the enemy attacked and caught you without conscious energy, and you went into depression. Or a new person coming here, this happens all the time, you know. A new person coming here here's a certain fact and the certain right fact, and the enemy counterattacks, and he goes out and he says, I'm not coming back anymore. That's because he allied himself, by the way, with the counterattacking force rather than with the active force of trying to understand what life is all about. Now you have to stick with the truth. And you know how much here we try to and succeed in reducing truths to simple, short statements. You know how much we emphasize that? We can't take very much. No long paragraphs. No long paragraphs with 10 sentences in the paragraph, and each sentence has 5 different thoughts. If we've ever followed a rule here, the rule of whole life, it's the rule of simplifying everything and concentrating our attack. That is, taking this single thought. We had it last night, didn't we? I asked you to write a list. Taking a single thought and sticking with that. For example, you can say to yourself a truthful statement. I am the only enemy I have. I am the only enemy I have. Now that's a fact. Watch the counterattack. Especially new people. You may be onto this, but don't you think that you understand it altogether. I am the only enemy I have. Now everyone on the surface is going to agree with that. But the counterattack comes and it says, are you telling me that you're going to ignore all those hostile, hateful people out there who have attacked you in the past? They are the enemy. Inflation is the enemy. High prices is the enemy. A wife who's surly is the enemy. A husband who's cruel and domineering, he is the enemy. Don't you fall for that counterattack. You keep your guns ready. And all you really have to do, is if it's as simple as that, is to remember your original statement. Stick with it until it gets emotional in the right way. I am the only enemy I have, and that is it. I'm not going to permit a counterattack to succeed in taking me away from my position. You're not going to drive me away from that. I'm going to put every spiritual gun I have up around that position, all the spiritual barbed wire. You're not going to penetrate it. You are not going to get away with what you have got away with in the past of telling me that of trying to convince me that the truth is a lie. Well, where do you stand on that particular truth statement that you are the only enemy you have? Do you still quarrel with people? Argue with people? Now, maybe you're one of those phonies, particular kind of phonies, who doesn't argue outwardly with other people, at least in public, when you go home. Because you simply have a phony self-picture of being a peaceful person, a kindly person. You are violent. But anyway, back to the point. You have to stick with your position, and if you will ally your own intentions with the position, for example, the right position, that you are your own worst enemy, you begin to detect it. The invisible forces we talked about when we started, you begin to detect that is a fact. Where else is the enemy? It's not in that other person. You discover that he's just a machine. Now you're discovering that you're a machine, but you're getting that magic button that can begin to control both the enemy and that other person. the forces, that is, and also the enemy inside yourself. Isn't that nice to know that there's something in you that has power over the enemy that is also in you? The right side of the army, so to speak, has power over the enemy inside. Another statement. Take the following one. Here's a true statement now. This is a fact. Security cannot be found in any human relationship. Security, safety, contentment cannot be found simply because you've attached yourself to another person or group of people. Spouse, relatives, friends, organization. How many people are you attached to now and you're still scared? So it is a true statement, isn't it? Oh boy. The counterattack that's going to come back to you on that one. Do you know a person, a truth despiser, a truth hater, who is here, who might have been here this morning, some so-called religious person who came here, and they heard that? Can you imagine how that would distress them? Of course, because they are putting their so-called strength and their security in their religious friends and their religious activities. But I'm talking about the counterattack. And you had better see in your human relationships where you still believe in someone. Where you still, even if you're lonely and don't have anyone, you still say, if I can get. You stupid men, I know you think that if you could get the right woman, you'd be okay. You're never going to get a right woman because you're wrong yourself. Wrong men get wrong women. Vice versa. I saw a couple smiles back there somewhere. Well, you're going to have to do a lot of work already with what we've covered, and we're still going on for a little bit more. Now, I want to ask you what you would do with the following statement. In fact, I want you to look at your reaction to what I'm going to say next. And let's see what gears begin to grind and what wheels begin to turn and motors begin to whirl and whir as I make the following statement. You don't have to be anyone at all. Were you able to get any kind of a counterattack to that at all? I gave you a fact. I know it's a fact. And you suspect it's a fact, but you don't want it to be a fact. Furthermore, I told you at the start, the enemies, those enemy soldiers, are invisible. And so when I made that statement, because their attack is invisible and you haven't developed powerful enough spiritual eyesight, spiritual binoculars, because you haven't developed it enough, you didn't see the attack, and so you say nothing happened. If you live a wrong kind of a life, that means there's something wrong with you. And that means the counterattackers are in charge of you. Now let's try it once more. You don't have to be anyone at all. Now what does that mean? You don't have to be liked. You don't have to be liked by anyone. As if that has any meaning. You explain to me what you mean when you say you have to be liked. All you really want is someone to confirm your delusion that you're someone. And since it's a delusion, it can never be confirmed. And if the other person doesn't confirm it often enough or with the sweet talk that you want to hear, you get mad at him. And by the way, when you get mad at him or her for not confirming your illusion, that is one of another little trick that you play on yourself in order to keep your delusory, invented self going. Do you know that being disliked and being hated is a part of the mad game, the mad battle of life? Being disliked, being rejected is very valuable, isn't it? You understand that? Why it is valuable? Because, of course, it puts the thought back. I am rejected. that person who usually speaks and smiles to me as I come in here, she seemed cold this morning. I wonder why she was cold to me. Perfect evidence that you enjoy your pain. You played a little trick on yourself, all unconscious. It's so invisible to you. You don't know what's going on down in there. But you play little tricks on yourself all day long in order to not see the truth that you don't have to be anyone at all. Now, see how fiercely and subtly you do things to attract attention to yourself. A little comment or a little sarcasm, try to see how you attract attention to yourself. Now, a real weapon against that false move would be for you to deliberately make yourself inconspicuous to other people, even in this class, anywhere. Say to yourself, from now on, instead of walking and running around like the little machine that I am going to knowingly let people ignore me by not attracting attention to myself, in order for me to understand how desperate I really am to have other people notice me. If you're a man, you want that girl to notice you. You're a girl, you want the boy to notice you, and other people to know you. You still want your parents to notice you because you're not grown up yet. You're still a 5-year-old kid. Here's a 6-foot 5-year-old kid wanting his parents to approve of it. You see, we're so desperate for other people to tell us that we are someone. When that young man who stands up and makes these announcements, when he says this class is unique and there's no other place on it on earth, I know how it sounds to new people. I'm very well aware of it. But I want him to continue with it, because certain people, maybe after coming a few times, will understand it. We don't care what the people, truth haters, do with facts like that. That's up to them. But you will come and you will see the health in going into certain deliberate, voluntary exercises of saying, okay, from now on, I have been aware that I do attract attention to myself. Little things, little remarks, or whatever it is. At the same time, you see you have a contradiction in that. You want to hide out. Can you see the contradiction? You go back and forth. First you don't want anyone to notice you, then the next day you hope everyone notices you. So you have to deliberately practice not feeding your neurosis of having people notice you. Now, you can do it deliberately. You can say, I'm not going to speak up as I usually do. I'm not going to walk over and join that little crowd so that they will, as I walk toward them, they unconsciously see me out of the corner of their eyes, and people naturally, the body responds to out of the corner of their eye, and they open a little space in there because they see you coming, and you already are saying, hey, they noticed me coming. You ever notice that, by the way, that the body moves? People's not looking at you. I see it all the time here. The body moves because people see you coming, and already you've got, not a thing has been done yet, except you walk and you've already got a vanity thrill. Here I come, and they move, the magic curtain moves aside, and there I am in the crowd again. See how subtle it is? This is the road to mental health. Are you tired of being sick? Then don't read those lying books that tell you that you can and should be someone. And when you go to the end of it, you will see that indeed you were an escapee from a lunatic asylum trying to be someone. God says, no less an authority than God himself says, you don't have to be you at all. And when you see that and you are not you at all, then you are everything you need to be, and rest and contentment come at last. Now, who are you going to believe? Reality, truth, or your own lying minds? Believe truth and see how this right energy is used rightly to change you into the kind of a human being that deep inside you want to be. But you don't know yet. You don't understand who you should be. And you can't. You must find out who you should not be. And you should not be anything that your neurotic mind and emotions tell you you should be. Put reality in charge, and it'll do all the work for you. And all you have to do, but you have to be very alert to this even, all you have to do is listen and obey. Some words do arouse strong emotion, don't they? Just one word, and you start to change inside, start to feel things, start to get fiery, so you start to perspire. This word is shame. Now, here, you're not being accused of anything. I'm just putting the word out. But even putting it out and letting it fall on elementary associations can sometimes start a jitteriness inside you, right? And someone says to you, seriously, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for doing that. And you begin to wonder what you've been doing, huh? And then you can no doubt think of a number of things. So we want to talk about shame tonight and see where it has its right place and where it has its wrong place. When you do something and feel ashamed over it, you must realize the first rule, which is this. The reason you feel ashamed is because you have identified with action. That sarcastic remark, and someone called it to your attention, that act which hurt someone, that blast at someone. And someone does say to you, you ought to be ashamed for doing a thing like that. You identify with the action, with the word that you said, the action that you made, and indeed you do feel ashamed. Now, listen carefully. When you do make a mistake, because you've been taken over, you've been captured, when you do make a mistake of some kind, there is the jolt of it, isn't there? When someone says you shouldn't have done that, or you tell yourself you shouldn't have done that. So there is the jolt. Now careful. You did something, said something that was wrong, hurt somebody. And someone said you should be ashamed of yourself. There's immediately the shock over what they said. Now you make your mistake. You make your mistake of beginning to think about it. Now you've brought ordinary thought into the process, and when you do that, you've lost your opportunity to understand shame and put an end to it. You may not even put an end to your mistakes, but you can put an end to self-centered shame. All right. Someone says, you should be ashamed of yourself, and there's the jolt. And you start thinking, here, listen to this. Think of a series of things that run through you after you've been accused of doing or saying something wrong, screaming at somebody maybe. I must be a terrible person. Don't you say that? Well, if you don't even know you say that, then you'll have to become aware of that. You'll have to start further back than where this talk is. Simply to see how you start accusing yourself and enjoying the false fire of self-incrimination, self-slander that you give yourself. Now you've formed an identity of being a guilty person, a person who is terrible. Now look how you could have handled the accusation after you actually did do something wrong. Look, you did something wrong because you identified with the action and because you were unaware of whether the action was right or wrong. You didn't know it. You blurted it out. You were impulsive. You haven't slowed your life down to the point where you can look at every action as it comes up, and if you need to act, to have proper judgment on whether it is right for you or whether it is wrong. So you're accused of something. The shock comes. Now let's see what you could do right at this point. Oh, that's easy. You say to yourself, yes, that is what I can, if I have to use labels, and they're all right, if I have to use descriptions of my behavior, then I could say that it was wrong because I was asleep. It was wrong because it was self-defeating. It was wrong in that sense. But I didn't do it because I've been coming to these classes so long that I understand that I never do anything. There is action which I call my own, and I love it when I get a medal, but I hate it when you bawl me out. Now you make an experiment. This is for your work too. Next time you do something that causes you to feel ashamed of yourself, you spotlight that particular action, whatever it might be, and I want you to understand that the reason you shake and tremble and feel bad is because indeed it was an act or word that was done in separation from reality. Therefore, the reason you feel ashamed is because you understand that you didn't live up to what you could have done. See? You're already a little bit aware of the fact that you could have done better had you stayed awake. And you can instruct yourself in this endlessly. You can say, the reason I screamed at that person, the reason I misbehaved here and there, is because I was not aware from moment to moment of my actions, of how my hands were gesturing or what my tongue was saying. I was not aware of that, so it fell under the influence of thought. And thought is where, quote mark, I live. Thought is where my self-built self lives. And so it falls on that, and I get a wrong type of shame, and I glory in that, and all day long I fall asleep and make mistakes and then feel ashamed about it and take great pleasure in having gotten through another day. Having gone through another day and protected myself. And you've done the exact opposite of that. What you have done is protect the mechanical mechanism which will keep the mistake going the next day. Don't you find yourself repeating wrong behavior? Just now we're talking about relatively small things, but don't you find yourself repeating them over and over again, a sudden flare-up of temper, of anger, something like that? Then afterward, maybe when someone calls it to your attention, you go through the whole process of feeling guilty over it. Now you analyze in your own right spiritual analysis what I'm talking about, so that you can begin to separate yourself from the action. You are not your actions at all. If you and I were permanently our actions, we wouldn't be here in this room. There'd be no point in it. We just have to go out in that world and continue to suffer. And what I'm talking about, incidentally, is a gateway to the lifting of all your suffering. Now, you know my usual question when I bring that up. Do you want to end it, or do you like it? See, all right, I'll make it brief this time, but listen. If you suffer, that's your first choice in life. If you suffer, that is your first primary choice in life. Now, not even secondary or thirdary or fourthary, but way on down, maybe about in your 20th choice, there's something right in you. And that part comes to this class and it listens to these things, and it's still weak and it doesn't understand very much. And it looks up and it sees this enormous dark cloud of suffering that has covered your life up to now, and it wonders how on earth it can ever overcome it, and how you can ever get to the point where you can say to yourself, I don't want to suffer anymore. I think it's a very foolish process. You start to say that, and you'll begin to see for yourself what you have really wrongly valued. You and your agony are one. To give up your agony, you have to give up you. Now, you've heard that before. How come you haven't done it since the last time you heard it? Because you still don't understand what you have to sacrifice. The word sacrifice doesn't mean anything to you. It has a wrong meaning to you anyway. Here's a Wyoming cowboy riding along the trail. He's riding along, minding his own business on his way to the roundup. And 4 or 5 men gallop on over to him. And one of the men introduces himself as a sheriff. And he says, "Cowboy, we're a part of a posse. We'd like to swear you in as a deputy. We need you." And the cowboy says, "All right, always glad to cooperate with the law." And so the other man swears him in, and he says, "Here's the story. A stagecoach has been held up a couple hours ago by some bandits. They took it over. And what we're going to do is take the stagecoach with the gold shipment, of course. Stagecoach always have gold shipment, don't they? We're going to take the stagecoach back from the bandits. Just as they ambushed it, we're going to ambush them and take it over." Cowboy says, "Fine, all right." So they all ride on over. But this cowboy, Wyoming cowboy, is told that he's to be the lookout, see if any other bandits approach from a distance. He's to fire his gun as a warning. So he stands back and says, "Fine, if I see anyone approaching, I'll shoot my pistol." So he sees the other men ride off, and they go down. Pretty soon the stagecoach comes along. It stops. In the distance he can't see much of what's happening, but obviously the gold shipment is taken back, the strong box, that's always thrown down on the ground. And he shoots it off. They never unlock it, they shoot it open. What do you mean you check on? Pretty soon the 4 or 5 men come back with the strong box running on back. And when the lone cowboy sees them, he realizes what has happened, because they just took their masks off just before they got back to him. He'd been taken. He'd been fooled. They were the robbers who had tricked him into thinking that the others were. All right. He's ashamed of himself. What happened? What happened to you when you get tricked, when you get deceived? What happened is because your mind was ignorant, right? What happened is that you didn't understand the situation. Haven't you ever got into a situation which you didn't understand, and then a little later you did, and you were sorry you got into it? All right, now he can do what we are supposed to do with our errors. At first there's the shock. Now if he goes wrong, he's going to feel ashamed and guilty. Say, how dumb can I get? I should have known better. I should have studied their faces. I should have asked a few questions. But between trips into Wyoming, he comes to our class here, you see. And he understands that after the jolt, he can go into right reasoning. After you see how foolish he was, he can simply think something along these lines. All right, I'm riding along, and the men come up, and they give me a con story. They tell me a lie, and I got taken over, the excitement over it. Hey, I'm going to be on the side of the law. Something exciting. My life is pretty boring. Gets boring chasing cows around all day. Now, or the possibility that he might share in a reward in some way. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't know human nature. He didn't even look around to see the masks that were halfway hanging out of their pockets. All right, fine. A mistake was made through ignorance, through lack of information, through having wrong attitudes toward the situation, through not having that very valuable quality that we call spiritual suspicion. You had better be a lot more suspicious with human beings, starting with yourself. How many of you have base motives? How many know what the word base means? It's not a game that you see on TV. That means low motives, for those who know. When we see the motives of other people, when we know they want something from us, oh no, you don't call off the game. You know what you do? You take out your metal, pad, and paper, right? You put a line down the middle, and you put profit and loss. And if the profit is $10 and the loss is $8, You go into great glee over a $2 profit, right? It's a bargaining situation, isn't it? All right, go to the word strain. How many of you are strained? Shall I tell you why? Those of you who raised your hand and those of you who didn't are strained simply because you want your way. You want your way instead of the way. Here you are learning the way, and thank heaven for the day when you put the way ahead of your way. There is no other way for you to get rid of the strain and pain in your life. Now listen to what I said. See how, words are so easy to speak. English language, it just rolls out. I said if you're in strain, general strain in life, it's because you want the way you think more than the way reality thinks. You've made your choice again for the way you think because it's so familiar and so easy to do. You don't have to make any effort, do you? You just have to roll forward. If a man's planting a garden and he sees a bunch of rocks out in the garden, he plants the seeds, plants vegetable seeds, and he sees a bunch of rocks, 50 rocks out there. When he looks at those vegetables that are under the seeds under the ground and the stones, he's strained over it. He's looking at a situation and he's strained over it. And he says to himself, a lot of work to go out there in the hot sun, pull up those rocks and throw them up. I guess I won't. I guess I'll leave the rocks there. And then he starts to rationalize and to explain. And he says, nature will solve all problems. The little seeds coming up will come up to the rock and then come out to one side, and the plants will grow just as well as they did anyway. Your self-explanations don't work either, do they? So he sits there on his porch, worrying, trying to convince himself that it's natural and right for the rocks to be there, simply because he doesn't want to do the extra work. See, when you have a strain, you have to put another strain on top of it in order to get rid of both strains, which is as follows. He can't lie to himself anymore. And he wants the natural reward of the squash and the tomatoes or whatever's coming up. So he gets out in the hot sun and, look, do the work you have to do. Just do it. When you get off of that back porch, walk out in that hot sun. Here you're sitting in the nice cool porch with your lemonade over there. And you want to just stay there, don't you? Don't you know a major principle of what we're doing here? Get out of that chair. Get out there and watch your mounting terror as you see the shade decreasing and the line of the sun out there. And go through the shock of exiting the shade and going into the hot sun out there. And then going to all that work. You know, when you do something deliberately like that, you are more conscious than you were before sitting in that shade. You know that. Because you have deliberately put yourself in an uncomfortable position. But when you do get out there and you get all those rocks out of the way, listen to this. When you get all the rocks out of the way, you can go back to the porch now. And now when you sit on that porch, you know a number of things. First place, you know you did the right thing. You did what is right, what was necessary. How many of you have rocks in your head? See? Now you know what's right and necessary. See, the removal of the rocks made nature move properly. He didn't have to explain anything. He didn't have to tell himself how nice the crop of squash was going to be. It's going to be all right because he did what is right. Now, you want strain to decrease, to little by little fall away from your life, so that you're not afraid of people like you are now, so that you understand why you got trapped into the kind of a life that you have now. You understand it perfectly. And I will tell you, listen to this cheerful news. If you understand why you're trapped, that is the beginning of the end of it. You can't break out without knowing that you're in it and that your own uninformed nature walked right into it because you lived in dreamland and you wanted certain rewards out of that relationship, for example. Which brings us to disillusionment. You must be disillusioned. You must be disillusioned because you were illusioned in the first place, right? You know what an illusion is? Let's find out. An illusion is something that does not conform to reality, to what is true. An illusion is a false pleasure that you would rather run through your mind rather than live in reality. An illusion is something that enables you to keep the lie of self-separation going, that you are you, and much, much more than that. See, most human beings are utterly fearful of being disillusioned with people. A man goes out into the world, a woman goes out in the world, a man fails to make money. He says, okay, so I didn't make money. He goes out into the world, well, so I didn't make the mark in life that I wanted to make. No. But both the man and the woman hang on to one thing very dearly. They hang on to other people. They hang on to other people because they're a people. And it's the closest thing they've got to their own mind. But because of that, the instructions to people to be disillusioned with people is the last thing they want to hear. You cannot be free of a person until you're free of all illusions regarding him. Now, if you're still under someone's authority and you don't want to be, sometimes being afraid of a person, it is because there are delusions, illusions in you that you don't as yet see, and it's about time you made a secret and earnest effort to discover where you have given that person false power over you. You know how often and how we're going to continue in this class to be harsh on ourselves. Not simply because we like to condemn ourselves in order to keep our mind on ourselves, but simply to understand the fact that people are undeveloped. And when you're undeveloped, you're immature. And when you're immature, you're tricky. And when you're tricky, you get angry. And you get scared. And you do all kind of wrong things in order to keep another person in your life. To keep people liking you. To get them to give you honors, and you give them honors in return. And that's the trading situation. Nobody you know, no human personality that you know, is able to give you anything but their delusions. Nobody can give you love. Nobody can give you authentic comfort. No one can give you understanding. No one can tell you what you need to know. No human being of his own self can do that. So, with that in mind, using your mental pad and paper, how many people do you have in your life who are deluding you, and you may not see it clearly as yet, but you can get spiritually suspicious about it? People go around offering to do things for you, don't they? You do this for me, I'll do that for you. And you're a little bit worried, but you take your pad out again and you say the benefits, I hope, might outweigh the disadvantages. And then the whole thing tumbles down. And here's two people or a group of people angry at each other, weighting each other down all the time. No one happy, wondering how you got into the trap in the first place. Here's a man, businessman. We'll make him a businessman. Businessman decides to start a new business. And his business is an amusement park. You know, with the merry-go-rounds and the Ferris wheels and the boat rides through the jungles of Africa and the restaurants and the clowns and so on. So he tells all his friends he's going to open an amusement park. And to his great delight, all his friends come over and offer to help him for nothing. You'll see the point of this. It's exactly the way it is, this story I'm telling you. All his friends come over and offer to work for him for nothing. One man who knows restaurant business comes, he says, I'll give you some help on starting the several restaurants you're going to have throughout the park. Another man says, I know all about boats. I'll get the boats ready for you to go through the channels, the African channels. Another man knows mechanics. I'll be the repairman on the merry-go-round or whatever. So all his friends offer to help him, and he is delighted, and he's very stupid. But they all offer their services and go ahead and do it. And they won't take any money. They won't take any pay. Let me interrupt. Always remember the delayed payoff. Right? Do we get home? People who want something badly can be very patient. Amusement park opens. Lights all over the place, and thousands of people come in. And his friends come over, and first of all, they gently ask for free tickets. See, the flip-flop. He says, I can't give you free tickets. I give you free tickets. I have to give everybody free tickets. No free tickets. The request turns to a demand. Look what we did for you, and look how selfish, how cruel, how withholding, how inhuman you are. You know, I'm going to break into this story and tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the T-shirt concession at that amusement park. And guess what I'm going to sell? For those of you who don't know, T-shirts that say no. He's disillusioned because he was stupid in the first place. You people here who still believe in what you call love and cooperation and giving a hand, look, the only way you're ever going to have a right relationship with anyone else is, of course, to have it with yourself. You know that. But the only way you're ever going to have a right relationship with anyone else is to have so much of yourself, your right self, that you don't want anything from them. You do the exact opposite. You push them away. By the way, and I'm not going to go into details on this because you'll go wrong on it. By the way, when you're in this stage where you push people away, you make them all the more crazier to come to you. It's very advanced. I'll give you just that much for now. You want to be so free, Edward? Nobody can bribe you. Nobody can give you anything. And get about 200 people like that in this world. What an influence they would have. A beginning influence. Scattered all over the world. Get a few people listening to them. Well, you can't get disillusioned with other people in the right way until you've gone through a lot of conscious experiences with the people who are presently in your life. You'll have people in your life one way or another. Even if you live alone, you know, grocery clerk that you see every other day, a man that puts air in your tire. You get a lot of people in your life. You watch your relationship with them, and you watch and see when a man puts air in your tire, and you look at his face, he doesn't even know he's doing that. You watch your spouse, you watch your wife or your husband, or your children, or your parents. You watch them in daily action, and they don't even know what they're doing at the moment they're doing it, do they? Now, a person who doesn't know what he's doing at the moment he's doing it is asleep. And a person who is asleep is a person who is scared and who is desperate. And a person who is scared and desperate will do anything to exploit you, to use you, to try to make themselves feel secure. And since it's an impossible task, they must continue to exploit you endlessly, day and night. Until you understand, there's no relief for them. There's relief for you if you understand what is going on. Now, a word about higher action. Mechanical action happens all by itself. It has no intelligence in it. It just goes all along without any conscious force behind it. There's such a thing as higher action, conscious action, intelligent action, in which you never do what is wrong toward another person because you can't behave wrongly toward yourself. But in all your human relationships, because you're behaving rightly toward yourself at all times, that automatically, all by itself and without thought on your part, changes your relationship with everyone that you're in contact with. Now, this is real magic. This is true spiritual magic. You'll see it happen right in front of your eyes.